It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. I warned patrons I'm going to be spicy this week because I am very frustrated with the amount of crappy astrology online. And I was frustrated before, but this week, I don't know if it was the black moon forming, during the waning gibbous phase, the moon touched off with my Pluto and my South Node in Virgo, or if it was Mars squaring off with my Mercury and my Sun. And if none of that makes sense, don't worry about it. Just know I'm a cranky bitch right now. And so I'm wearing a t-shirt that Matilda sent me because she always gets to hear my rants. And some of them are astrological and make no sense to her. But anyway, it says, hold on, I'm overstimulated. Because I am. The amount of just make stuff up where it isn't real online is remarkable. We've got misinformation campaigns going on from everything from politics to the weather to spirituality. And just because you learn how to be in tune with your intuition, which is always a good idea, doesn't mean that it's an astrological fact. Okay. Astrology has a lot of rules. By the way, as I record this, the sun is in opposition to Saturn, and Saturn is trying my sun and my Mercury. So I'm going to be the rules gal. So my monologue is probably going to be a little spicy, but we're also going to be talking about misogyny in the moon in astrology and understanding exactly how powerful the moon is when it comes to lunar transits and why the black moon on Sunday, September 21st, was the real story everybody was ignoring in favor of a partial, not a total, a partial solar eclipse. We may even talk about lunar nodes a little bit and the orbs we use with them. And I'm going to say, I was so blessed to have my very first astrology teacher who took pity on this young lady online and who was like, I was such a skeptic, and he was like, I'll teach you. I'm like, well, I'm going to prove it wrong because I think it's BS. And what it made me think things were BS is because people just made stuff up, It'd be like, this is in alignment and this is out of alignment and, all the fake spirituality, new age bullshit. And I had already left organized religion because people couldn't follow the rules that were prescribed, right? So this particular individual, whose name is William, and he's in Australia, me and Australians, I'm going to have to eventually visit because some of the most important people in my life, especially in my spiritual journey, have been from Australia. But anyway, William took pity on me. And the one thing he insisted on was that I study mundane astrology equally to personality astrology because he felt, and I believe rightly so, that you don't just change the rules because you're looking at the inner landscape. And so when we use, orbs, he's a mathematician and a computer programmer. And he was like, you can't just change the math. And I was like, oh, that makes sense to me. Happened. And I realized last year, I told you I was going to be just on one today. I realized last year when I went to the UK and I went to the event at Royal Albert Hall that, I was like, oh my God, I get along with everybody in this room. We all have a similar philosophy. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually learned more of what would be considered British astrology than I did American astrology as my foundation. And then as I grew as an astrologer, and once I came back to the States, then I, dove into the deep end with Joanne Wickenburg and studied with Jeffrey Wolf Green. I went into evolutionary astrology, and all of that is wonderful. But you don't get rid of the foundations of the math and the calculations. And so when I got more experience under my belt, first couple of years reading professionally, and I would go to conferences, I'd be so annoyed by people who were just being like, well, we don't really do it that way because that's mundane. And I'd be like, yeah, but it's got solid documentation on its validity, observation, notation, study. And people are like, well, our guidance is giving us different answers. And I'd be like, how does that even work? Just how? Just explain it to me. It's the same problem I have with the divine masculine, divine feminine bullshit, because it's still rooted in misogyny. And so we're going to talk about misogyny on the podcast and how it infiltrates astrological interpretation. And of course, I'm going to talk about what's happening in the week, because we have some big bada booms this week, and they aren't due to the eclipse. I don't care who's saying what on the internet. So let's just get those parties started. Poor patrons. They're like, oh my God. Because I went on a live on Saturday night and I just let loose. I was overstimulated. I was about to have a meltdown. And so I went into the Patreon, and at least I managed to let the steam valve open a little bit, and was like, it isn't working this way. So anyway, get your tea, get your coffee, get your water, get your matcha, get your Red Bull, because somebody made a request for that. Get whatever your favorite beverage of choice is, and whether you're driving to work, be careful in traffic today. We'll get perfect parking, and you have a bubble of protection around you. That's how I drive. I always end up not stuck in weird traffic situations. So you've got my little safety bubble around you. Whether we're going to school, taking a hot girl walk, taking a hot guy walk, getting the dogs taken out, giving attention to our feline overlords, whether we're folding laundry or washing dishes together, or we're at the gym. Thank you for getting me in shape. Whatever we're doing it together. Big shout out to my patrons, as always, for sponsoring this podcast, because we are 100% listener supported. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of you. All right, let's get going. I'm still, all right, I had to change my clothes. Because as a Libra moon, I was like, that white t-shirt isn't working on camera. It's just making you look floofier than you are. So back in some pretty things. So that partial eclipse was not the big deal everybody was making it out to be. And everybody's always looking for that big event in the sky. The total solar eclipse last year, that was a big deal. The one that went through the original 13 colonies. Yeah. That energy rings out over time. This partial solar eclipse, I think it has impact given the rest of the astrology, but I think it has more to do with climate change and potential seismic activity looking at you, New Zealand. So please do be aware. It's not 100%, but there could be more seismic activity in your region. So be mindful and be as prepared as you can be. I think the thing that got me this week was the amount of people willing to go in with their whole chest about astrology they don't understand and speak from an expert position when they haven't done the study. I know that sounds arrogant, but I have done the study. Nobody just said, oh, you got to read this book or this book or this book. I went out and I found things, and I was broke. I was a single mom of 2 little kids, and I came back to America with $50 in my pocket. And I wish I was exaggerating, because that time period of my life sucked. But I'd put a couple bucks away every now and then, and I'd go to thrift stores and use bookstores, and I would glean information. I would go find it. Okay. You can do that. You can do that. CC Zane is a pretty good resource to get started with mundane understandings. Okay. I found his work. I found William Lilly, who was an astrologer, I believe, in the 1600s. Anyway, he was pretty opinionated, and his work is a slog to read through, and you have to discern your way through it because it's a different way of thinking. But besides being an astronomer, he was an astrologer. The astronomers hate admitting those things. So there you go. Go look those guys up. Go. Don't just look online for used books. Go out and explore. Astro Mom is very cranky. I think I'm most angry because people are ignoring the black moon in all of this. And the moon is such a powerful agent for life on planet Earth, both from a physics perspective and from an astrological perspective. So a black moon is when you have two new moons in the same sign. In August, we had a Virgo new moon at 0 degrees. I talked about that. You can listen to past episodes. And then the 21st of September of 2025, we had a 29-degree new moon. Virgo is all about systems, efficiency, effectiveness, and it's day-to-day life. It's our schedules. It's our routines. And having two new moons in Virgo says those routines are changing, right? That's why I had you do a personal inventory back in August. Go look at that. Go look at that episode. I had you take inventory of your skills, your ideas, your ideals, your talents, because you're going to need all of that to go forward. And don't tell me you don't have any, okay? Everybody's got skills, whether you make a mean pancake or you can cook in a can on a fire, which I highly suggest everybody know how to do. Not that we're going to lose electricity or modern convenience, but there's always power outages. There's always weather, and we've got a lot of weather coming up, okay? California has some flooding already. Remember that prediction I made back in 2022 about floods in California? Just wait, there's more on the way this winter. Not that I'm happy about it. I was hoping I'd be wrong about that one, but be well prepared. I'm cranky. I'm cranky because people are just making stuff up. And that goes along with the divine masculine and divine feminine. Okay. Because it's still using patriarchal interpretations. Being feminine is soft and compliant and receptive, and male is bold and strong and action taking. And frankly, that's a patriarchal viewpoint. Why isn't it masculine to be nurturing? And why isn't it feminine to have confidence? Like, these were conversations we were having back in the 90s about social constructs when it comes to gender. And it's like they just jumped over all of these important conversations and went back to these really confining definitions instead of you are who you are. And you can express yourself as you express yourself. We want to look at social and cultural conditioning when we're interpreting astrology charts for an individual, absolutely. And I can see where somebody's maybe a little less conventional to the social norms of where they were raised and the time period in which they were raised. But you don't even see gender in an astrology chart. You don't, unless you know what the gender of the person is when you're looking at a natal chart. You have no idea. In fact, if you're looking at an astrology chart and it doesn't come with a name, and you just have a date, time, and place, it could be an event, a coffee cup, a puppy, or a human being. It doesn't even tell you what of those things it is unless you assign the reference point. And part of our reference points are understanding anthropology, sociology, psychology. And we have to know what the social norms of the time were versus where they're at today. And is this person in line with those social norms, or do they walk to the tune of their own percussion section? Okay. So when people are just making stuff up, I get frustrated because there's rules to how we do astrology. There's rules. That's how we prove things over and over and over again. Okay. And when we deviate from those rules and we make shit up, it does us no good. It does us no good. And I am not confusing astrology and astronomy when I say an eclipse has to be visible in your physical location to be an eclipse. That's not confusing the matter. It is traditional astrology. I talked about that last week too. So it's very, very frustrating to me to watch people just make up whatever and people believe them. It is ridiculous. So I know everybody wants me to talk about Charlie Kirk. I really don't want to talk about Charlie Kirk. I think there's some very strange things going on with it. I'll talk a little bit more about it in my patron only podcast, but I'm not going to talk about this stuff on my public podcast. When he didn't have a birth time. I mean, I did look at his chart, and there were some indications of potential aggressive acts in that, just with the placements, but there's no time. And so you can't give an accurate astrological assessment. The odds of there being violence this week are very, very good. Mars pops into Scorpio today, September 22nd, and it's making immediate square to Pluto in Scorpio. And we haven't seen a fixed square between Mars and Pluto since November of 1940. You can look up some of those dates, but there were immigrants fleeing Europe that happened to be Jewish, heading towards Palestine, which is what it was called in World War II. And their boat was sunk. Like when we look at the rhyming scheme, I'm very concerned about the Freedom Flotilla again. I think there are bound to be some tragedies as we go forward this week. When it comes to bombings, invasions, conflict. So the outer world is going to be very busy. What do you do in the face of all this uncertainty, right? It's really easy to be scared as we watch things unravel. And we could even see the Epstein list or files released this week. We could see authoritarianism try to grab hold more. We could see conflict in Europe expand. You know, there are turning points happening, and there are crossroads we're facing globally. And it's easy to be afraid. And some of it is worthy of being cautious of. But what you can do is limit your exposure to the news, because we are in no more of a dangerous time than we have ever been. Not really. It's just you're getting information so much faster, and you're being bombarded, and it's hard to sort out what's real, what's not real. And that's, I think, why I get so mad about the bad astrology is it's scary enough. We don't need people talking bullshit. Rawr. I get mad because it scares people, and the world is scary enough. It's scary enough. And I just want to remind you, when I do the What's in the Headlines segment for patrons, this is what's in the headlines. So if you see a clip of that on TikTok, that is not the whole of what's going on. That doesn't even mean that you personally are having a shitty day. Too often, people grab hold of an idea without questioning it. And that leads down to all kinds of misinformation, the misuse of information, propaganda, and things that have no basis in fact. None. And all it does is produce more fear, more anxiety, and it makes you controllable. If you don't want to be controllable, you have to question everything. I am so quick to research stories when they come up on my TikTok. So somebody says, oh, did you hear that such and such happened? And so is saying this, and this particular event happened. And you know when I look it up the most? when I agree with it. Because it's really easy to tune into that cognitive bias. Oh, I resonate with that. Yeah, that's got to be true because I think that way. No. That's the most dangerous time of all. That is the most dangerous time of all. That's when you go, is that really true? Did that just happen? Because there's a lot of things people are talking about and they act like it just happened and it might have happened 6 months ago. Okay. I saw a couple stories about Putin's health on TikTok on Sunday, and those stories are so old. A couple of them are a couple years old. A couple of them are a couple months old. And so you need to question everything right now because the truth is obscured. Okay. The truth is obscured. And just find some reliable sources. And I don't mean TikTok creators. Just go look at the AP. Go look at Reuters. Go look at factual information. Okay. I feel so much better. And I think one of the reasons people don't think a new moon is strong enough to create change is because of inherent misogyny, it's so funny because the whole reason an eclipse is powerful and considered malefic, besides that usually ended an astrologer's career back in the day, is because the moon is dimming the sun. Right. And the sun is usually representative in a masculine way, and the moon is represented in a feminine way when we use the patriarchal definitions. So, oh my God, something masculine is being eclipsed by the feminine. Oh no, whatever will we do? The moon, it governs our day-to-day life. The moon and lunar transits are powerful. Most of the change we face in life happens like that. Whether it's an accident or a meeting of someone, a decision we make, those happen in moments. They happen in moments. They don't happen gradually over time. That's evolution. And that evolutionary change, the transmutation of energy, the transformational change, that's outer planet stuff or tertiary. But those moments of clarity, those moments of understanding, those moments, what we do with our day-to-day matters. But notice how we teach history. We only teach about the battles and the important men, sometimes women. We don't teach, this is what market day was like. This is how people gathered their eggs. This is how people gathered their water and how often they gathered it and what were the receptacles. Was it an amphora or was it a goat skin? We don't talk about how we walk to the next village to meet the auntie or the uncle. We don't talk much about how clothes were made. We don't talk about the general day-to-day trade. We don't talk about child rearing practices. We'll talk about the weapons of war. And oh yeah, there were some baubles in there that an artisan made. Those baubles, those bracelets and necklaces and rings that someone really wanted and someone made it for them. And they wore it with pride. We don't talk about their hopes, dreams, aspirations. All we do is focus on fucking war as history. A little bit about the architecture, a little bit about transportation, sometimes the economics, but not the day-to-day. And a lot of that comes out of the 19th century mindset that really hammered in misogyny hardcore because they were looking back to ancient Greece and sometimes had very poor translation skills. And that's where the fairer sex came into play. That's where the don't mind your little head came into play. Much stronger. Because back in the Middle Ages, there were these women called beguines. And they weren't a religious community. They were lay people. They weren't nuns, but they were independent single women who were tradespeople and artisans. And they actually played a huge economic role. Go look them up. Beguine. We don't talk about those. We don't teach about that. And they did it for a reason. Right? They liked their independence. The 19th century did a lot of harm. It doesn't mean there wasn't misogyny before that. There was. But it really kind of codified it, right? These thinkers, right? Especially as women were saying, hey, I like reading. I like creating things. I like inventing things. I like making things. And we're faced with this again. And it bleeds into astrological interpretation. I can't count the times when I've been in a professional setting and sitting with other professional astrologers, and I talk about how much I look at lunar transits. And they're fleeting. I don't really look at those. I'm like, but that's how you live. You live from fleeting moment to fleeting moment. Why would you only look at these big things? Why? Why wouldn't you look at the minutia of life? You can tell the moon is in Virgo as I record this, but look at the minutia of life, the day-to-day, because that's where life's happening. And lunar transits are like clockwork. There's no variability. They activate the other transits. The moon acts like a focal lens in our day-to-day life. And that 29-degree new moon was something else and very powerful and demands better organization, demands a better structure to the day-to-day, demands a more effective and efficient schedule, demands better organization, not just organizing things, but organizing people. It demands it. Now, even though the moon is no longer in Virgo, as you listen to this, doesn't mean you can't sit down and look at how you can make things more effective and efficient in your own life. Because when you take care of the little stuff, the big stuff smooths out. It just does. It just does. If you organize things a little bit more, and it's not about being OCD, it's not about being anal retentive, it's about making sure your systems in life work for you. And if you're a patron, I went through setting those intentions in the Patron Only podcast, which, by the way, you can find on Spotify now. I finally have everything integrated. The Patron Only podcast can now be found on Spotify. So you can listen to it there. You can subscribe to it too. But there you go. There you go. But yeah, that's why I've been frustrated. Because of these stupid ideas of what's masculine and feminine that make no sense. These old, worn tropes of this is masculine and this is feminine. The amount of, like, last year, the amount of TikToks I saw where women are like, I'm leaving my masculine era for my feminine so I can be taken care of. And I'm like, really? You can be taken care of. You can take care of yourself. You can be nurturing. So can men. Can be soft and nurturing and strong, and women can be strong and confident and nurturing. It isn't about one or the other. Just like I say with astrology, the moon is always how we process emotions. Every single moon sign is emotional in their own way. Every single one. When you hear people say, oh, this moon sign is too detached or aloof and doesn't have emotions, that's really bad astrology. And it's very bad and dangerous psychology. Every sign, every single moon sign experiences emotions. The sign shows how. It is a descriptor. And I talk about that in the Planet of the Month Club moon video. There's more than one moon video in there. Okay, so if you're an astrology crew, you've got that. And I think I made it so you can purchase those lectures. I'll have to. So if you don't want to subscribe to Astrology Crew, you can still purchase the Planet of the Month Club videos where I went all 12 planets, all 12 houses. I described everything by the signs in those videos. So I didn't really feel like I needed to go by the signs. Signs are descriptors. Okay. It's how a planet expresses that planetary energy or that luminary energy. The house is the where and the what you're dealing with. So what part of life are you interacting with? The sign describes how you have that relationship. Okay. I told you, when I get angry, I get into teaching mode because I'm like, I can't handle ignorance. I can't. Ignorance can be cured through information. Okay. If you don't know, you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And that's fine. That's why I teach. Switch the light on, she says. Illumination. And now that we've had the moon will start to wax forward so we can have illumination with the Aries full moon on October 7th. But that's a totally different episode. All right, let's do some patron shout-outs. The Astrologers Roundtable is now its own mini podcast. You'll be able to find that here on Spotify, but you can also find it in the Awake Space Patreon. So it's a great way to get to know the astrologers of wokeastrology.com. That's my website. These astrologers are reading under me. I've handpicked them. They are fabulous, and we have a rousing good discussion. And I think you'll enjoy this week. We're going to talk a little bit more about the moon and how powerful it is, besides the day-to-day, but looking at what else we can harness when we talk about the moon. I've gotten some pushback about talking about Patreon so much from listeners. And here's the deal. If people don't like hearing about the Patreon that supports my work in the world financially, don't listen. It's that simple. So for right now, we're going to be shouting out our newest patrons. Let me get to the list. All right. We've got Jennifer, Sammy, Brinley, Sassy Frassy, Autumn, Jen, Vic, MD, Ava, Energy Muher. I absolutely probably just goofed that, but I know it's Ava. I know who Ava is. Gina, Hilga, Alicia, Soul Music Heals, Jen, Jess, Sheridan, Kat, Deidre, Linda, Mary, Esma, Tete, Tatiana, Intuitively Beth, Elizabeth, Danny, Sarah or Sarah, Emily, Val, Marzi, Stephanie, Rob. Uh-oh. Nikki, Mena, Tamara, Patience, Bruxa, Manny, Linnea, Essa, Jordan, Amanda, Riley, Ashley, Kai, Patricia, Iced Matcha Latte, Five Dream Flux, Katie, Shanisha, Amy, Marissa, Rumination Redacted, Colleen, Mel, Joyce, Jason, Nicole, I'm Amber, Amanda, Flora, Baker Non-Baker, Angela, Heidi, Serena, Danette, Heather, Cavaldi, Megan, Maria, Jody, Amber, Gloria, Kim, Leah, Cleisha, Ori, T. White, Stephanie, Nikki, Emily, Stabby Unicorn, Amber, Marilisa, Paige, Sarah, Saf, Jewel Sphere, Stephanie, Megan, Neva, Zen, Kelsey, Shreen, Morgan, The Ghost Derican. That's cool. Jessica, Catherine Marie, Jackie, Zoralia, S.A. Ortiz, Tea in the Graveyard, Elizabeth, Vale, Nar, Cara, Billy, Vanessa, Jet, Alex, Cassandra, Victoria, Laura, Hope Estes, Jenny, Leah, Ariel, Megan, May, Carmen, Morgan, Paradox, The Heathen Aquarian, Danny, Amanda, Carmen, Heather, Albano, Megumi, Joanna, Roxana, Glitch Paladin, Sasha, Jackie, Vilma, Keisha, Aaron, Jorge, Emily, Star Sister, and Looney Tutor. I love that. Oh, welcome, new patrons. I appreciate all of you. Without you, there is no podcast. So I really appreciate you. And to the people who are pissed off that I took the predictions off the public podcast, well, that's too damn bad. You can listen to it in the patron only. Or I'll make it a pay-per listen. But patrons at the $5 level a month and up get that. I don't know what to tell you, but I don't make money from ads. We are 100% listener supported, and I'm not going to change that anytime soon. Okay, we got a couple of classes coming up here this week, the 23rd, so Tuesday. Susie Evolutionary is teaching Trauma-Informed Tarot. Trauma-Informed Tarot, you can check that out at wokeastrology.com. Patrons at all levels, $5 and up, save 50% on that course. Don't forget to use your coupon. In fact, I got to make sure that coupon works. Okay. But anyway, it will work, I promise. And then I've got 2 lecture series started. The first lecture series is the Astrology of the Child. And I thought with so much misinformation online, especially about the moon, mother, and emotional processing, that just having a lecture series on understanding the astrology of the child, how we look at the chart, how we understand astrology akin to human development, that's child development, how we look at how we can support children looking at their astrology chart, and also support ourselves as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc., teachers, right? How we can support people and understand the variety of human consciousness expressed as children grow and develop into their adult form. Children are people in and of their own right, and that's something we're going to talk about in the Astrology of the Child 3-part lecture series. And then I'm also doing Making Moves by the Moon. It is how to use lunar transits in your business, whether you're a coach, a consultant, a counselor, a service provider, a brick and mortar store, how to utilize lunar transits to really maximize your time and energy. It's not great for big businesses the way I'm teaching this. This is really for people with like 20 employees or less, or solopreneurs, because it's about how you apply your energy and your effort. And the moon really governs that in our day to day. Everything ebbs and flows. I'm going to help you know when to plan your time off, when to plan your downtime, when to put your grind on, when to focus on revenue, when to focus on marketing, when to focus on developing product or looking at how you're presenting things, when to get out in the public eye and when to kind of pull back into the office and get the paperwork done. All of that can be plotted with lunar transits. And I'm not a big fan of pulling electional charts, like what's the very best day to launch? But I do love using lunar transits to know when I'm going to make the most out of my energy. So if I want to launch something, I do look at the lunar transits. I'm going to teach you what I use to get so much done being pretty much a solo operator. So if you want to sign up for that, you can. Patrons at all different levels get different discounts for my classes. So make sure you're checking your member discount in the collections tab. You'll see what yours is. Okay. Alrighty. So let's talk about the moon a little bit more. So the moon is very, very powerful. The transits are fleeting. They last 54 hours. Okay. So one lunar transit, like per sign. So 2.5 days, the moon moves through a sign from 0 to 29 degrees. Okay. In that time, a lot can happen. Have you ever noticed your moods can go up and down? You can have all the energy in the morning and then woof, you could lose energy in the afternoon or vice versa, right? You could have no energy in the morning and then woo, after lunch, you get a kick. That could be a lunar transit. Okay. Because the moon ebbs and flows. Its energy ebbs and flows, and everybody has their own individual ebb and flow. Years ago, when I first started the Patreon, one of my higher tiers was called Living by Luna. I'm reworking that. Okay, I'm reworking that to make it just a little easier for people who are new to astrology. But Living by Luna was something I developed starting in 96. The moon governs the day to day. And the day to day is not less important than big world events because your world is lived in the day to day. You become less prone to being manipulated by the media. You learn how to control your consciousness in a different direction. You learn how to center in your energy when you learn to pay attention to what's going on in your day to day. You're far less able to be manipulated. And that's really, really important, especially as we go through this week. Okay. You don't want to be whipped into a frenzy because one side is trying to cause global conflict. And we will see global conflict this week. Like if you're a patron, you get access to my 2025 year ahead. I'll link it up in the show notes. Okay. You can still purchase it if you're not a patron. Patrons at the $5 level and up get access to the 2025 year ahead video. If you're at the $15 level and up, you get access to the slides. Okay. So you could just read it and you don't have to listen to me apologizing to you the whole time. Like, I know this is really tense and really scary. We get through this. It was so stressful. That's why I changed things up for the 2026 year ahead, because I was like, okay, I can't just give this news. I need to give you strategies on how to deal with it. I felt like crap leaving people drooling and depressed after the presentation. And that will become available to patrons as a perk. April, May usually is when I release that to patrons as a perk. Okay. So you get to 2025. All right. By the way, Matilda and I have an event on October 11th where we're going to give our, join forces for our 2026 predictions. Again, mine have already been done, but we're going to join together and dial in a little deeper. And when she and I join, we kind of magnify each other's energy. And so it's an intense experience, but it's usually a really good time, and you are never shorted on information. If you want to go over to the Patreon, we put up a couple public posts. I'll link them in, and you can see how fast things came in. that we predicted. Our last event, over 200 predictions were made in the first like 20 minutes, and they came in boom, 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 boom. Speaking of, what's in the headlines is a patron-only mini podcast that you can check out in the Patreon. So this week is intense. It is intense. And on the 24th, that a lot of people online are talking about because somebody had some inside source that said, don't believe anything you hear. I don't know what to make of that. It's just everybody's going to be wanting to be special and in the know or whatever. But we do have the moon conjunct Mars on the 24th. I did a TikTok about this. Okay. That's really explosive because that moon conjunct Mars is square Pluto. It will be explosive. I do expect things to heat up in Eastern Europe. I don't have good news for what's happening in the Levant. I just don't. I think it's going to be really gruesome. And I'm very concerned about mosques, okay, throughout the Middle East. I'm very concerned about the regional security in the Middle East. And I think between the 24th and the 27th, we could see very, very explosive political events. And that could be domestically. I think we could see a mass casualty event in the United States. It could be a bombing. It could be a suicide bombing somewhere in the world. It's going to be nasty as we go through the week, but it's not the eclipse's fault. Lunar transits are powerful. Just because it's fast moving doesn't mean it's not powerful, okay? It is. There are 8 moon phases. The moon as a transiting object or a moving object activates other planetary bodies or energies and acts kind of like a lens to us energetically. And so this week is intense. I don't want you to be too freaked out, but I can't do anything about that, right? But just know that this week is going to be really intense. I think we could see a lot of released information that could include the Epstein list. I think we may be looking at a government shutdown. I've been concerned the last few times they've pulled it through. It's just, I think power is going to try to hold on to power, and things are going to get ugly before they get better. Notice how war is increasing. It's not the end of the world. We make it through. And this is, I think, it sets us up for October, and October's energy makes September look like a cakewalk, period. Okay. So things are going to heat up before they cool down. So we're moving into a crescendo of 2025. I really look at October as the crescendo. Doesn't mean November is super easy, but it gets really legal in November. And then December, everybody's really tired, but it ends with a bang. I'm just giving you that heads up. And you're like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. We're all tired, and we all don't want to do this anymore. But it's really, really important for people to join into community, understand that your day-to-day matters. Okay. I know they all look at the big name. We're watching how history gets spun propaganda-wise as we look at that particular person whose funeral was on Sunday, making him out to be something he really wasn't. And doing that as a way to build a narrative, okay? And a lot of historical figures have had narratives built like that. It's a propaganda tool, okay? So I'm going to say it's really, really important this week, if you can, to just tune out the noise as much as you can and get creative. Get super creative. All right. I know some of you listen to the podcast so you could get your season so you can sleep. It is intense this week. All right. It's not the rapture. but there is probably going to be an inordinate amount of violence shown to us this week from multiple places in the world, including here in the United States. What can you do? You can choose how much you consume. Okay, I'm going to say it again. Being more aware does not make you morally superior. It's also a really good time to take some of that angst and worry and fear and pour it into being creative. We've talked a lot about crochet. We've talked a lot about painting, ceramics, throwing pots, whether you're doing pottery or sewing, baking. We're moving into fall. The weather's going to be changing up as we move through this week. We may see a lot more wet weather as we move now through the end of September. The temperatures are going to start getting cooler and considerably so in some places. So it's a nice time to start doing some cozy things. Make a cozy soup and some bread. You're in control of your present moment. Okay, the news is not in control of you. And the sooner you learn that, the better. That's why they're trying to use censorship as a tool. That's why they're doing things to make people afraid, is because the more in control of your consciousness you are, the harder you are to control. So they're throwing, news bombs at us. They're manufacturing events. And I do believe some of these events have been manufactured to throw people off center. Manufactured outrage is dangerous. So you can meditate. You can listen to music. You can go for a walk. You can host a dance party with your friends. I just went to a dance party last night with some younger women. My mom and I went to support their event, and Mom was dancing. And she's just, 78 years old. This Gemini, who's a Leo rising, is always ready to boogie. Super fun to be there with Mom. I got some cute video of her. You need to do things that help you transmute and transform that Mars in Scorpio energy into strategic action. This is just such a good time for you to plan ahead, plan forward, look at your long-term strategies, and lay in wait for your enemy. No, wait, sorry, wrong thing. But anyway, one of the things we do in the awake space, especially if things are a lot, okay, if there's a big news event that's just really rattling or disturbing, I come on live and we come together in community, and it's so, so important. This is the time to sit and really work on long-term strategies, because Mars in Scorpio is long-term strategy. Okay. It is strategic moves versus the impulsivity of a Mars in Aries. Mars in Scorpio can play the long game, and it's just as intense as Mars in Aries. It's got more longevity to the use of its energy. It moves slowly and in the undercurrents. Okay. But it doesn't mean it isn't moving. All right. If it's your Mars return, meaning you have Mars in Scorpio, it's not your return the whole time. If you're a patron, you have access to Introduction to Planetary Returns. A return is only when the planet or luminary returns exactly where it is to the degree and minute in the birth chart. It's not the whole of the transit. Okay. But make sure you're doing things you want to do. Because whatever you're doing on the day of your Mars return, you're going to do a lot of it. So I like to be deliberate in my choices on how I spend that energy. So, and that could go for everybody as well. Like the more deliberate you are in your actions right now, the better off you're going to be. And don't beat yourself up for being instinctual or reactive. It happens. It'll be okay. But anyway, I am hoping you have a really good week. I've got to go record the What's in the Headlines for patrons. I want to thank you for listening. I'm Laurie Rivers, and I'll see you next week on the Awake Space Astrology Podcast.